everyone, welcome to another fabulous episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities presents Hometown Haunts. I am your host, Kat Klockow, and tonight with me I have Christina Wald.
Hello.
And Jen Koehler.
Hello.
And we've been up to a few different things this week, but first we have a Kickstarter update from Christina.
Woohoo! Well, I like to think we're in the home stretch.
It feels like we're in the home stretch.
I know. We're 92% funded. At this moment, we only need $389 to be fully funded. And then hopefully we can think stretch goals after that. And so it's going really well. We can do our happy dance. Not the happy dance, but a happy dance.
Well, we are planning a Halloween stream. And I know, am I kicking it off?
Yes, I believe so.
So at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll have more information, I think, next week as we have more artists joining us. So we'll have a schedule and all that official stuff. But I'm kicking it off at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook, and I'll be drawing live, probably digitally, so I'll have a 2-camera setup. And I can take requests by people in the chat, and my specialty is drawing monsters. So
cool.
Good topic for Halloween.
And I'll probably start after you finish, and I can take some requests. I don't know if I'm going to work digitally or traditionally yet. It depends on my mood. I might do traditional.
Yeah,
I can draw stick figures.
You could do color commentary.
There you go.
Oh, there it is. People like whenever you make a mistake.
And she's just going to put a little floof over there. Put in a happy cloud over there.
Live streams are where it's at right now, really.
It is.
I always think watching people draw is a little bit like watching paint dry. That's why I usually, for my students, when I do my lectures, I always speed it up a little bit because it's watching someone, like, it does feel.
Although I'm addicted to the time lapse stuff on Instagram. It's fun to watch people put their artwork together.
But that's much
quickly.
more fun. Time lapse is like sped up.
Well, yeah.
Watching it live is slow.
Yeah.
It's like it's in real time.
Yes, it's like.
What's that?
What's that like? I'm going at a snail's pace. Yeah, I always like putting my stuff in hyperlapse so that you can see how fast everything. Because at the end, even I'm watching it. I'm like, hey, that looks decent. I did a good job today.
Yeah, well, it's hard. Like when you're drawing it, it's like a different. Yeah, it's like until you see it at the end, you don't know what's going on.
Do you guys ever feel like you're never satisfied with your finished product?
I think that's a constant thing with all artists.
Yeah, we want everything to be the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's usually
just roll with it.
It's usually the most okay thing ever.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably the best attitude you could have.
Yeah. It's just like, this looks good for today. I'm going to move on and work on something else. Like every single comic page I finish, I'm like, this looks like a mess, but somebody will like it.
Well, that's always the hardest thing when teaching students is that perfectionism, and they go over this in Creative Juice all the time too. Perfectionism kills productivity.
Mm-hmm. And creativity,
yes.
I think.
Yeah, finished is better than perfect. And so you just have to let go. If you try to like noodle something to death, then it never gets done. And you get kind of into this downward spiral.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
it's quite common. There's imposter syndrome that a lot of people will have. And it's super common. And you're not unique if you have it. And you just work through it. If you're a professional artist, you need to be creating something every day. So it may not be stellar, but it's something.
Yeah. Well, but it keeps you fresh though, too, I think.
Yeah.
And that's how you get better. You have to draw something to get better.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Famous science fiction artist Kelly Freas said that your style is the same mistakes you make on every painting.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a nice way. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say the head is always too big on all my characters.
So do we want to talk flaming skulls? I know I have an obsession, and maybe this is an
No,
intervention.
I enjoy your flaming skulls. So we have a flaming skull naming contest for our wonderful flaming skull that Christina makes for every marker that we make with Kickstarter at every level. And they're just getting more and more elaborate, but the flaming skull needs a name, and we don't have one. So, Christina, what are the winner and runner-ups going to receive?
They're going to get digital copies of our book. So we'll give them a download for them to read so they can enjoy and see the flaming skull in the book, because it's in the Satan's Hollow book in color in the digital version. It's in black and white in the printed version.
Ooh.
I know. So you'll see it coming out in
It looks really stunning on your pages. It's very eye-catching, which is why we use the flaming skull as our mascot.
It's just one of those things that works.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with it.
No, and they're
Exactly.
known the world over as really popular haunted entities. Like, yeah, flaming skulls in Japan and in Britain and all over.
I know. Troy was just asking today. He's like, "Why are flaming skulls? There's none in the book, are they?" I said, "There's always flaming skulls."
Mm-hmm. Every good paranormal book should have a flaming skull.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll then announce the winners of the naming contest at our Halloween show.
Which is next week.
It is next week.
I know. But we have a really exciting episode planned for next week too. Which
Yes.
we can talk a little bit about later.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
do we want to head into weird
stuff we saw this week? We need a jingle for that.
Yeah, or like some sort of weird announcer voice thing or something.
Yeah.
Like a crypt keeper kind of thing.
Yeah. So Christina, you're first on the list. You found something interesting to share with everyone.
Yeah, I was reading, I always listen to the Mysterious Universe podcast, and I was reading that one of the articles on their site, and it was saying that most Americans living in haunted houses don't want to sell them. So it seemed to indicate that people like their ghosts, the things that go bump in the night, and are proud of them. I guess unless they're doing something really aggressive and bad, most people are not bothered.
Right.
And perhaps you noticed this when you were doing ghost hunting. Were people more terrified or amused?
They usually, when I get called in, and mind you, also as a historian, so they were just wanting more clarification as to who they were basically living with, and more information about the life and how they can kind of connect on a more person-to-person level with whomever's haunting the area. I know I have lived in a few different haunted houses, and other than like once in a while the laundry detergent being spread on the floor annoyingly, it's like living with a roommate that you really can't yell at really
or do
at all.
anything.
This is like, gosh
Yeah.
dang
Did she
it,
still yell,
Annie.
though?
Yeah, like stop banging the closet doors at night, or gosh darn it, Fred, stop staring at me while I'm sleeping, kind of thing. So
Well, it's interesting. They have the breakdown of where the haunted houses are because they did a survey, and 18% of the people. Now, the thing that I guess if you look at this into the, amount of population and area, like in the Midwest where we are, like 11% of people reported having haunted houses, but in people living in the West said 18% of them thought they had haunted houses, and then in the Northeast it was like 13%. So I don't know if it's more, in the Northeast, you would think it would be pretty high because those houses, have been around for a while.
Yeah. Like the house I lived in, Rhode Island, was super haunted.
Yeah. Was it super old?
It was from 1749, and we had two ghosts in it. One that we called Elizabeth or Beth, and she freaked the ever-loving crap out of both my dogs and my mom whenever my mom would visit. And then we had a teenage boy ghost that was a bit of a bathroom peeper.
Oh,
so this is not the first bathroom peeping ghost. Oh my God, we're gonna get so many weird comments on this YouTube channel. But in this particular house, it wasn't always a house. It was modified to become a single family dwelling. So the master bedroom and bathroom were actually in the basement. And so I would be in the shower in the master bedroom, and we had one of those, and we still do actually, shower curtains like a hotel where you can actually look out into the rest. Like there's a little viewing window between you and then the rest of the curtain. And so I could see from time to time, it happened maybe twice when I lived there. This teenage kid would just walk through the wall, see me, and I'm like, the hell, dude? I'm in here. And he just walk right through like the toilet through that wall again. Happened twice. And I was just also
That's
happened at the
skeevy.
Stanley. It's skeevy. I hate it when it happens. It's like when you're in the bathroom using the loo and then somebody walks through and you're like, come on, give me 5 minutes of privacy, please.
Yeah, that is creepy. Although
we should
interesting-
do an episode on haunted toilets.
Well,
yeah, that's the other thing is that I get like, hey, you can see me? And I'm like, yes, now get out.
Yeah.
well, you know, Troy worked on a Ghostbusters toy when he was at Kenner, and it was like a toilet that turned into a giant. Did it have a tongue? Oh, it was one. He said he didn't work on that one, but it was one of the ones, and they got like some very interesting letters from people about it because it like turned. It was a haunted toilet that turned into a.
Oh, no. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No.
Mm-mm. No.
No. No.
All
No.
right, so we're gonna look at some of the houses, right? You're gonna, we're finding relics in Singapore, Michigan.
Oh yes. So I had a fun weekend. A little bit of legend tripping. I always try to do some legend tripping when I travel. So we did our only vacation this year to the wonderful place that is Saugatuck, Michigan, on the coast of Lake Michigan, and not too far away from where I actually grew up. It's about an hour north. And the interesting thing about Saugatuck is that it's kind of built over the remains of a ghost town, and one of the Midwest's few ghost towns, and one of Michigan, I think is one of Michigan's few ghost towns, where the dunes basically they deforested the logging community, which Singapore used to be, to the point where the dunes from Lake Michigan kept blowing in, and over the course of 30 years basically devoured the entire town. So it took from like the 1870s to the early 1910s, and it just dunes have taken over the entire area. Now Saugatuck is actually just south of where Singapore was, but they do have 3 buildings that they were able to save before they were taken over by the dunes. And it's kind of not quite a scary ghost town story because no one died. The sand was so slow that everyone was able to evacuate, but the buildings were left. The buildings that were saved were the Singapore Bank and then 3 private residences. And now there's only 3 of those 4 standing. So you can go see the original Singapore Bank. It is at 317 Butler Street and is a bookstore known as the Singapore Bank Bookstore. Very well named. And then there's 2 private residences. So I would not go and bother these people. When I went to take photos, and I'm sure Christina will show you the photos that I took.
Yes.
I literally jumped out of my car, snapped a photo, and left. I didn't even get on their property. They have been interviewed at several times in different Michigan magazines about living in. They're not haunted houses. They're just historically important houses. So the Holland Street house is from the 1860s, and it's actually the 2-story portion of the house was originally in Singapore. And then the Lucy Street house, which has a huge contemporary addition. It's just a square building with a little roof and everything. And that's the original part of that house. It has a summer porch that's been put on in the front, and then additions to the back. So as I said, they're historically important. The interesting bit was that they were moved. I know that little white house on Lucy Street is from 1868. The bank is from 1834, and they saved them by carrying down, putting them on slats and pulling them on a frozen Kalamazoo River. So they were put on the frozen river and basically hauled down to Saugatuck. So I find that interesting. The Lucy Street house used to have wood ties that they believe were responsible for helping bring the house down to move it. So, and then I took a picture of the historic site landmarker, which reads, beneath the sands near the mouth of the Kalamazoo River lies the site of Singapore, one of Michigan's most famous ghost towns. Founded in the 1830s by New York land speculators who hoped it would rival Chicago or Milwaukee as a lake port, Singapore was in fact, until the 1870s, a busy lumbering town. With 3 mills, 2 hotels, several general stores, and a renowned Wildcat Bank, it outshone the neighbor to the south, the Flats, as Saugatuck was then called. When the supply of timber was exhausted, the mills closed, the once bustling waterfront grew quiet, and the people left, most of them settling here in Saugatuck. Gradually, Lake Michigan's shifting sands buried Singapore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting story. Do they know why they called it Singapore? Was it?
I did not find any literature as to why.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Maybe
Yeah.
just.
Do you know how far below the sand they are? The city is?
So it's not too far. They've removed a lot of it over time. There is currently a housing development being built on some of the parts of Old Singapore, and it's called Old Singapore Way, was the cul-de-sac that they were being built on. I did not manage to get over to the dunes to take photos because traveling with a dog and a toddler is very difficult.
Yes.
And I didn't
Right
want
on.
him to get eaten because the dunes around Lake Michigan do have little caverns and pockets in them, and it's not uncommon for people to fall through them.
Ooh.
So
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah, there's
Mm-mm.
there's been a few deaths, and I had a friend die off the coast of Michigan, Lake Michigan, a few years
Aw.
ago.
Hmm,
So
terrible.
the dune did not eat him. He was swept away from undertow.
Oh my
But
Oh, no.
yeah, he's very fondly remembered. But yeah, they are somewhat dangerous to go up if you don't stay on the paths that are marked.
All right,
Yeah.
Mud House Mansion. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would
Okay,
be good.
Mud House Mansion. I came across this because someone posted a picture of it in the Queen City Murderinos Facebook group.
Yes. Hi,
And I'm like,
Murderinos.
And I'm like, oh, I want to go there. I want to go there. Then after doing some
Mm-mm.
research, it was torn down in 2015.
You could have just asked me, and I would have just been like, nope.
It's just so sad. I'm like, I want it though,
Yeah.
but
Second Empire. That's the style.
yes, I was about to say it. But yes, I guess they had to tear it down because they couldn't keep people away
It was super unsafe.
and super unsafe. Oh my gosh, after seeing the videos of the inside, I'm like, yeah, that needed to be torn down.
Yeah.
It was bad.
It was bad.
And I guess through the years, the family would have to physically sit out there and guard the house with
Yes.
guns
Yes.
to keep people off their property.
Yes.
No
Yeah.
trespassing.
Yes.
So I wonder if they ever shot at anybody. They didn't say that. in the
According to
article I
some of
read.
the just rumor mill, yes, they did
Yeah.
shoot not at people, but like at the sky, going, "Hey,
Hey,
get
I'm
off our
here.
property."
Hmm,
So,
it looks
what is the
beautiful,
history
too.
of Mud House Mansion other than it was just demolished?
Well, they don't know exactly when it was built, somewhere in 1839 or 1852. They think more around 1900, 1870s because of the Second Empire architecture.
Mm-hmm.
But it was Christian and Eleanor Rue. Is it Rue?
Rugh?
Rugh? No.
R-U-G-H. I would say that's Rugh.
Rugh. Okay. Purchased the property from Abraham Kagi and Henry Blyler. I'm terrible at names. I'm
Byler?
so sorry. They purchased it in 1919. The property was sold to Henry and Martha Hartman. Henry Hartman died in 1930, and the property was inherited by his daughter, Lulu Hartman, who married Orrin Mast. Her descendants still own the land today.
Mm-hmm. And they're planting corn on it.
Huh?
They're planting corn on it,
Oh,
according to an interview.
that's cool. Let's see. It's known as the Hartman Place.
Mm-hmm.
Same building described as Rug Mast
Mast.
House in Book Heritage of Architecture of Arts in Fairfield County, Ohio, by Ruth W. Drinkle. And this is all from Wikipedia, obviously. But what is interesting, and again, I guess this goes back to how folklore gets started, just because it's an abandoned building, it looks creepy, then the rumor mill starts. And
well, it's a second Empire house, which is what I think at least the Munsters house looked like.
Mm-hmm.
So it already had that feeling of being haunted just looking at it.
Yeah. Well, the picture, but some of the ghost stories surrounding it, according to legends, after the Civil War, a government official still kept slaves, locking them up at night. One night, one of the slaves dug himself free and killed the entire family. They think it's pretty unlikely since Ohio was not a slave state.
It had a lot of black laws, so this actually is likely. So you mentioned that the folklore of Mud House Mansion was that Ohio was not a slave state. However, the families that had that house had freed slaves in their basement. One of them got out of the basement and killed everyone, which was unlikely. So interesting thing, and it doesn't give a time when this happened.
No.
And it also says another story sets a mass murder or mass suicide by hanging of a more recent family there.
Right.
Which, of course, those kinds of things would not have been recorded really in newspapers so frequently. But anyway, so going with the black laws, and mind you, this African American history is not my strong point. I'll give that little asterisk because I haven't read up on it in a little while. But the interesting thing about Ohio was it was very divided. Even though it was considered a free state, it was very divided, mostly between the rest of Ohio and the Western Reserve. Now, the Western Reserve is known as the Connecticut Western Reserve, and it kind of encapsulates the northeastern side of Ohio. So you're looking at along the Ohio Erie Lake Erie. I almost called it the Erie River. Along Lake Erie, and it encompasses Cleveland, Conneaut, Ashtabula, up to Erie, Pennsylvania, that type of area.
Mm-hmm.
And this was very abolitionist. And why I say this is important to my family history is my family is from this area of Ohio, and we're big abolitionists. And before they moved to Ohio, if they weren't from Canada, they were from Connecticut. So I didn't really ever put those two and two together. They were family knowledge, but reading this, I'm like, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So up until 1848, Blacks were not allowed to get educated in the Ohio just educational system. There wasn't much of an educational system, but what was there, they weren't allowed up until 1848. And it was really the politicians from Cleveland and Akron and up in this territory area that rallied for abolitionist just laws to be put on the books. So repealing all the black laws that were put up in 1802 to 1804 and just trying to make Ohio a much more free and liberal state. And this is a very quick, brief history of Ohio, but they weren't always all over. Sojourner Truth actually lived in Akron for a long time, and Aren't I a Woman's speech was held there in 1851. And we actually had John Brown and Simon Perkins, who were two big Ohio abolitionists, ran underground railroads throughout the entire state before the war. But I can't find very much information quickly about the Reconstruction era. But that does touch upon what Jay and Dylan worked on with the Mermaids of the Ohio River, which is about escaping slaves during the Reconstruction and wartime, and how they were treated in Ohio and Indiana versus Kentucky, because the Ohio River was really the landmark, I would say, of the Mason-Dixon line, though I will say attitudes towards freed slaves were really, the Mason-Dixon line's much higher and runs almost through Columbus, Ohio, through Indianapolis. So, yeah, that is a very brief history lesson.
A good one.
Interesting.
So it's
very-
possible that this could have happened there.
Yeah, they may have been freed slaves that were just kept from actually leaving. If that just basically imprisoned people, they had kidnapped people and left them in the dungeon. That's about right. Because I do know during similar time, you have up in Dresden, Ohio, you have the Adams family, and they had Prospect Place, which is a famous haunted location in Ohio, and it is also the Second Empire style with a cupola on the top. And their dance hall's on the third floor, and then the cupola goes up from there. And the reason being is that Adams were huge abolitionists, and they had a cattle ranch. So they deforested all of the cattle roaming area, and they would be a major stop on the Underground Railroad. So their basement barn doors were double the size because the farmhands would open up these doors, and when a certain lantern was shown at the corner of the cattle ranch, whomever was guiding the troop that's going north towards basically this Western Reserve or Canada, they would just run at full blast through this cow pasture into the basement. And the basement wasn't your typical basement with a root cellar. It was actually 2 bedrooms with fireplaces. They had made their basement specifically with like beds and comforts because these were people escaping terrible life conditions. And this is one of the few I don't want to even say perks, but this beat sleeping out in the woods. They were warm, they were fed, they were safe.
To sleep in.
They had a bed to sleep in. I mean, the mattresses were made out of straw, but mattresses weren't great back then anyway. And it was clean. And so that was the Adams family. Not enough is said about them in their house in Dresden, Ohio.
Oh, interesting. I'm gonna do more research on that.
That's fascinating.
So, and I did see the ghosts of some people there.
Really? Wow.
Oh, that was
that could be like a whole episode.
It's a whole episode. We won't get into it now, but Mud House Mansion, known for Bloody Mary, also in Ohio.
No, it said that it's the original Bloody Mary.
How many people claim that they are the original?
Every single one of them.
Every single.
Oh, really? So there's like every house says that they're okay. Well,
and that the house was haunted by a woman who killed her children.
Hey there, Yorona.
Oh, wait, hold on. A
Nice
woman
to
who killed
see you in Ohio.
children, or by a woman whose husband killed their children, or by all the parties involved in the tragedy. That makes no sense.
It seems like a lot of that stuff's super folklore. I mean, like, the spirits that kill children and stuff like, I mean, obviously, because people just used to keel over for no reason. So I'm sure there's a lot of lore that goes with that.
But the Mass family had every right to bulldoze the property. I mean, it was a beautiful piece of architecture, but they, with all the looky-loos and people coming and actually graffitiing the inside, it is trespassing. It was bad.
One of the videos I saw that there was a fire set in there at one point. I mean, it's really a liability for them.
It was. I actually dealt with a similar situation in Indiana, and in this case, it was the family of the Estes family, and their farmhouse was being turned into a haunted house attraction. And it ended up being the people that were turning it into the haunted house attraction were renting it, and they claimed paranormal activity. I've been there, I ghost hunted it. I had some strange activity, nothing what was reported actually to be like what happened to me there was not what commonly was reported happening there. And that could be a different episode too. Wow, we're teasing people left and right.
I know, all
But
these future episodes.
yeah, but the gist is the Estes family, the building became such a liability with the same issue with the looky loose coming in and breaking in and everything. And it just became an insurance liability, and they bulldozed it December 2nd of like 2018.
Oh, wow.
I may have gotten the year off. It could have been 2017.
It's
But I get why.
It's extremely expensive to insure empty properties.
Yes.
Because of that, people stealing stuff, breaking in, getting hurt.
Well, the family did say that it would have cost millions of dollars to renovate it.
Yes.
And I guess the day from a Lancaster Eagle Gazette article, the day that they bulldozed it, a construction worker put a sheet over his head and took a photo in every window. Yeah, before they tore it down. And I thought that was kind of funny and cute.
That's a fun sense of humor.
Yeah.
Poking fun. Yeah. Like I'm sure the Mass family, and this is just me speculating, Mass family, feel free to write into us if you want. cincycuriosities@gmail.com. I'm sure it was a pain in the butt for one. And to have this kind of, I'm actually curious about the family members growing up in a location that was said to be haunted and how that made them feel.
Yeah.
I've talked to family members that have deceased family members buried in Step Cemetery in Morgan Monroe State Forest. And that place gets vandalized every single Halloween. There's only one original headstone left. And they are pissed and tired of people stealing their headstones. So I'm sure, because headstones are not cheap.
No.
But to be able to renovate a house like that, you're dealing with lead, you're dealing with asbestos, you're dealing with, excuse me, something is in my eye.
There wasn't a floor left.
That feeling.
There was no floor left.
No.
It was a health hazard to be able to go there. So I totally get it. I mean, I know a lot of people would be like, dang, but
what do you do with it?
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we can segue into our guest talking about empty and unbuilt property.
So tonight we have our friend Jeff Suess, and he talks about the mischievous history of the magic 8-ball and the famous Cincinnati clairvoyant, Laura Carter Pruden. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful special interview we have with a local Cincinnati historian. We have with us right now Jeff Suess, who is the historian and librarian for the Cincinnati Enquirer, which is the newspaper here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Hi, Jeff. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yes, I am excited to talk to a local historian as a historian here. And then we also have Jen. Hi, Jen. Oh no, Jen is very quiet. Why are you so quiet, Jen?
Hello.
There we go.
Do I need to sit closer?
Yeah, you do.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. You're just like, hi. I'm back here.
I'm not known as a quiet person, just so you know.
That's why I was like, this is a little odd. So, Jeff, you brought us two interesting stories to talk about tonight. And the first one being the Chamber of Commerce building. Mm-hmm. So can you share with us the history of this place?
Sure. The Chamber of Commerce building was a design by one of the premier American architects named H.H. Richardson. And he was kind of a unique guy who liked to dress up in medieval clothing. And he was kind of a big bearded guy and kind of eccentric. And most of his stuff is out in kind of the Boston area. And so he designed only one building in Cincinnati, but he died before, or in Ohio, but he died before it was built. So it's his last design.
Ooh.
And the Chamber of Commerce, so it was the headquarters for the Chamber of Commerce, but this guy has his own style. It's called Richardsonian Romanesque style, and Cincinnati City Hall is done in the Richardsonian Romanesque style. And and so it's got those rough stones, and it actually looked like a castle. It had
Yeah.
these four towers on each end, and it's these rough stones and high windows and everything. And it's his style was very popular in the late 1800s. And so this was, if the building were still around, it'd probably be one of the gems of the city, really, because of how important he's up there with like Frank Lloyd Wright, and
Yeah.
as well known. And the problem with the building was finished in around 1895 or so, and in 1911 there was a fire one day, and there was the second floor of the building. They wanted to have it with these no sightline problems, so they had no towers. Instead, they supported the upper floors with like a truss system, and the flames got up to the truss and weakened the steel, and the top floors came crashing down.
Oh, geez.
And 6 people did not get out
Ooh.
in time, including there was an Enquirer reporter who had run in to cover the story and
Ooh.
was killed. So
Oh my
he had
gosh.
kind of a tragic, story in general. Well, the stones were still in pretty good shape, and so they had this idea to this observatory, or this astronomical society wanted to build an observatory out in Cleves, and so they went out into a park out in Cleves area, and they had all the stones carried out there, and then they ran out of money. And so the stones sat there for years and years and years, and they kind of forgot about them. Well, in the 1970s, there was an architectural student at DAP, University of Cincinnati's Architectural and Design School, and he was listening to this lecture all about Richardson and these stones out in the field somewhere, and he's like, well, I wonder whatever happened to those stones. So he went out there and found that they were completely covered in like poison ivy and weeds and all these things, and they've been out there for like 50 years. And so he had the idea to use some of the stones to build a monument to Richardson. So they had a competition at the school, and one of the other students won, and he designed this little memorial to Richardson that they put in Burnet Woods, which is a wooded area out across the street from the University of Cincinnati. And it's actually across from the DAP school. And the stones kind of look like a little mini Stonehenge or something. You have no idea why. Well, one of the stones, the tallest one, actually says Chamber of Commerce written on it. And it was what they call the lintels that would go over the door.
Right.
The entranceway. And so they kind of have this rose colored rough stones. And so that's the kind of the history of that. But before all that, that's not a story that people really knew that much, unless you happen to be around DAP in the 1970s. So most people are wondering why is there these statues, the Stonehenge sitting in Burnet Woods. Well, even more confusing was they didn't use very many stones compared to what was there. There was something like 2,000 tons of stones out in this field. And they still sat there for many, many years. And so these urban legends started building up around it, where people started thinking like, well, what are these stones out here? And the rumor that was going around was that it was some sort of sanitarium or asylum that had been destroyed and exploded. The imaginations kind of got big, but
wow. Yeah.
Because there was not enough. It was so far back in history, it was 100 years ago, that nobody knew anything about Chamber of Commerce. The average person doesn't know who Richardson is. They just see these stones out there. So the imagination kind of goes, because, it's quite a way. I mean, Cleves is not really close to downtown. So it's not like you would be thinking, oh, I bet this is that building, So it was, the story kind of came to me a few years ago when the wife of one of the advisors had come to me and said that they didn't have a plaque anymore on the monument, so they wanted to kind of tell this story. So it was kind of interesting to go back and research, the original stories about the tragedy and the stones. And I don't know if it's around that time because I became more hyper aware of them, but eventually the city decided that, hey, there's too many like elements with these old stones and things that they're not great for the environment or safety. And so they eventually removed the stones from the park, but I haven't really been able to figure out how you remove 2,000 tons of stones and where you put them. But so that's still kind of a mystery.
Yeah, that's really interesting though. I was just thinking that Richardson may have been about a century too early for the Ren Fair group,
Yeah.
but would have fit in very well.
Yes, and he was again apparently quite eccentric, but influential. I mean, if you look around, almost pretty much throughout the country, and you see buildings with the rough stones and the arched windows. Visiting my brother in Seattle, and I feel real knowledgeable. I'm like, that's Richardsonian Romanesque architecture, you know. But you know, so it's a shame that the building was lost, but because you know we could have actually had one of those, you know, the last piece of, you know, his legacy. But
Mhm.
the story ends up taking a weird turn, you know, by burning down and being tragic there, and then being lost, and kind of weird remnants.
Yeah, it's interesting how this. I love how urban legends get created
Yeah,
and how people will just weave stories from just seeing basically abandoned construction and construction materials too. So, Jen,
And well, and there, I was going to say, there's no indication whatsoever where the stones went.
I haven't been able to track that down. They had to be removed. The city had them removed, or the county, maybe it was. But I don't know what you do with such a thing. Do you try to break them down to smaller parts, or do you find
Yeah.
another
if it's a
building?
lot of if it was Cincinnati, they probably ended up at Spring Grove Cemetery somewhere.
Oh,
That's where they seem to dump everything.
there is another part of the building that's still around, and that is there were these stone eagles on top of the building, and they were repurposed and used in Eden Park. If you go
Oh,
past the Crone Conservatory, and there's a bridge, and there's
yeah.
4 eagles.
Oh,
And those are
yeah.
eagles from the Chamber of Commerce building. Mhm.
I always wondered where they came from because they don't look like they quite match everything else.
Right.
They're just like super detailed, and the rest of Eden Park looks like it's almost like this folk. Oh, that's my dog. Arts and crafts style stuff. Very, very rough.
Hmm.
I kind of wish they were still out there in Cleves.
Yeah.
Let's
I
go
wish
out
they
there
looked
and
like
try and find 'em.
Stonehenge in
Yeah.
Cleves.
Yeah,
Oh,
that'd be a
They'd
different
be all
story.
spray painted now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they would have been tagged.
It must have been something to see initially, though, before they did anything, to just walk out there and not have any
Yeah.
idea what these things are, and you know, having all the overgrowth. You know, it's
Mhm.
like what are these?
Yeah, that imagination running wild there too, I'm sure.
It was a lot of that. It was the Satan's Hollow story that Christina was telling me about. You know, that's immediately came to mind, that same sort of idea of this unknown thing that you start going, well, what could this be? And your first thought isn't, I bet this is a building from downtown Cincinnati. You know,
Okay, no,
Right.
you would never think that. No. Yeah.
And that reminds me of the random staircases that you can find in the woods. And there's one particular location, and unfortunately, I can't think of where it is. I want to say Massachusetts because I think my friend Jeff Belanger covered it. But it's at least in New England. It's just a random staircase from basically a vacation villa that was mid construction and they ran out of money. So this big grand staircase is basically in the middle of this forest. And if you look on Reddit in a lot of the creepypasta or urban legend groups, they talk about this finding the staircases in the forest and how you're never supposed to go up them. And a lot of it may originate from this incomplete villa in New England.
That makes me want to go out in the woods and just build a random staircase. Just for the sake of like production value and so I can take pictures. That is
Yeah.
awesome.
Put a track cam in there.
Yes. Put a ghost at the top. Push someone off of it. I don't know.
This is starting to feel like Scooby-Doo.
Kat, have you, in all of your research and stuff that you've done, have you ever figured out how like to track back urban legends to one person?
So a lot of
Or,
that
like
would
how they get
take.
started?
So a lot of that takes field research and interviews. So
Mhm.
one of the things that I did when I was still in school was track Bloody Mary. And I continued that research a little bit a few years ago when I was still writing, I think, Haunted Hoosier Halls. And it's a lot of interviews and trying to get approximate dates and then building basically a large timeline in the different variants that you find. Bloody Mary is a very difficult urban legend. We can do it with Slender Man, however,
Right.
because that one is a modern urban legend that was created online. And we kind of can do it with Black-Eyed Children as well. So depending on the story, you can kind of build these timeline cases and figure out where it started or the region where it started. You may never get one particular person, but maybe a region.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's it. That could be an entire episode into itself.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So the other story that you have to share with us, Jeff, is about the mysterious 8-ball. The magic 8-ball and its connection to Cincinnati.
Yeah, so we'll start back with the connection is that there was a well-known medium who lived in Price Hill named Laura Pruden. She was also known as Laura Carter, because she'd been married several times. And she was actually world known as throughout the world for being a medium and could speak to the dead. And she particularly had attracted the attention of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, who was a great believer, especially trying to find his mother and his son ghosts. And so I did an article about this in the Enquirer a couple of years ago. And I was going to read, if it's all right, a little bit about Doyle's writing about a seance he had with Laura Pruden. So this was from his Our American Adventure travelogue book. That she makes a dark cabinet by draping the table and holds the slate under it while you may. Oh, I should start off. She did slate writing.
Yeah.
The spirits would communicate to her, as she would say, and then write things down on the slate. So let's start again. She takes a dark cabinet by draping the table and holds the slate under it while you may hold the other corner of it. Her other hand is free and visible. The slate is double with a little bit of pencil put in between. After a delay of half an hour, the writing began. It was the strangest feeling to hold the slate and feel the thrill and vibration of the pencil as it worked away inside. We had each written a question on a bit of paper and cast it down, carefully folded, on the ground in the shadow of the drapery, that psychic forces might have correct conditions for their work, which is always interfered with by light. Presently, each of us got an answer to our question upon the slate and were allowed to pick our folded papers and see what they had that they had not been opened. The room, I may say, was full of daylight, and the medium, of course, could not stoop below without our seeing it. And he and his wife said, altogether, it was a most utterly convincing demonstration. Now, Doyle was also good friends with Harry Houdini, who was the great magician and escape artist. And Houdini was not a believer, and he used to go around and try to debunk the different psychics. And he was in town in Cincinnati in April of 1925, a couple of years after Doyle's visits. And there was a letter I found online on the Hotel Gibson stationery in Cincinnati, where that Houdini wrote that Mrs. Pruden, the medium I am challenging here, has been authenticated by Doyle, Bird et al. There's a couple of different psychics. So he went to challenge Laura Pruden and trying to solve it. There is no records of what he came up with. So we just have that when he was in town, he was supposed to meet up with Laura Pruden. But a couple of real quick side things. When Doyle died, one of his friends met with Laura Pruden again and had a seance, and he claims that that Doyle wrote a message to him, and his handwriting matched his signature on an autographed book he had of Doyle.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So,
so then we get to the other Cincinnati.
yes,
of that.
continuing.
So after she died in about 39, her son, Albert Carter, took the idea of speaking to the spirits and asking them questions. And he came up with a toy, and it was a cylinder, kind of like a kaleidoscope type cylinder. And he put liquid in it and these little dice that you could ask the spirits questions. And he went and found a couple of other local guys and one guy named Abe Bookman, who had some connections in engineering and stuff, and they started working on it, and they called it the Psycho-Seer. So it was, and they got a University of Cincinnati professor, a psychology professor, to come up with the types of what would be the good responses to have. And so that was, they called it was a Psycho-Seer. Their quote was the miracle home fortune teller. And they got the patent in at about 1948 or so, but Carter, the son of Laura Pruden, died right about the same time they got the patent. So Abe Bookman kept the company going, and it was called Alabe Toys. Al from Albert and Abe, Alabe. And so they tried to sell it for a while, and then these different companies would come up with, it's like, oh, could you do one in this? And the shape changed over the years. And so they went from the cylinder to a sphere. And there was a billiard company out in Chicago who said, hey, could you do one where you wrap it up and it looks like an 8-ball? And that's for whatever reason, the 8-ball is the style that really caught on, and it became the Magic 8-Ball. And since they sold the company and, went on to become this, huge, but the Bookman died, 30 years ago, but it was like 1992 when he died.
Yeah.
And he's buried in Evandale, and both Laura Pruden and her son Albert are both buried in Spring Grove. Like I said, everything goes in Spring Grove.
It kind of does. But that's really interesting. Something I didn't know when I moved here to Cincinnati is how much toys were an integral part of our history. Like the Kenner plant and the Kenner offices, and then now Magic 8-Ball. So
yeah, in fact, little plug, I wrote a book where one of my chapters was on all the different toys that came from Cincinnati. So you have not only Kenner, you also have bicycle playing cards, Play-Doh, Uno. Yeah, also started in Reading. So so all of those connections.
All the toys of our childhood.
Yeah.
I have my Magic 8-Ball somewhere in the house. I have to dig it out and ask it some questions.
I never had a Magic 8-Ball, but I had friends that had one, so that was always fun shaking it, seeing. But I brought up the Henry Houdini letter, and it was April 9th, 1925, and oh my goodness, I never realized Henry Houdini had really messy handwriting.
Yeah, a lot of people, they're using pretty fancy pens and things, it's probably a tip pen, but
yeah. So a little bit of information, just because there may be people interested in the type of medium that Lauren Pruden was. And she was one of two very famous, what they call independent mediums, being that they used a form of independent automatic writing to connect to the dead, not just automatic writing. They didn't use pendulums. She wasn't using ectoplasm, which you would see a lot of old photos of. So she was basically in the middle of a daylit room. She would put a writing tablet in the middle of the table. She would grab one side, whomever she was having do the reading for would grab the other, and then they would put what essentially was a blanket or something over it, and it would magically start writing. And that's the type of medium she was. And the slab, from looking at the old the Psycho slate, it looked like a kaleidoscope, as you said, but it seemed to have it sounded like it had a slab that things would not magically, but get written on, but there'd be chalk just loose bouncing around in it. That was the description I read, at least. So, and then it would just have yes or no and those simple questions.
Right. Yeah, it was much simpler because his original idea, and then he took it to Bookman, and there was another guy, and those took a little more care into it because there was an actual designer involved, and not, just a guy with an idea.
Yeah, and from what I read, it looked like half of the answers were affirmative, and then they would break it down to 20% negative and 30% just neutral. So got really good chances of always being told yes.
Yeah.
Was
So
Laura was never debunked?
No, I mean, there was a guy who did say he thought he figured out how she did it. Had to do something to do with like dropping her hand and reaching under and swapping out things or something. But, it's technically, how do you debunk things that, if they're carefully done, you're not going to, even if you did know, you weren't going to, wouldn't publish it or, and people like Doyle believed and people like Houdini didn't, and that wasn't really going to change.
Yeah. And she kept being a practitioner of being a medium until she passed away. So, well, Jen, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, this was great. Thank you for joining us on the show today, Jeff.
Thank you for
and
having
sharing the stories. Both of them are brand new. I did not know about them. And I always love learning new things. Jen, did you know about them?
Great. Well, thank
you. Jeff and I have been working together for years, and there would be days we would spend hours talking about random stuff from the archives because he was so interested in it, and I had no idea about any of it. So he told me about the Chamber of Commerce years ago, but no, I had no idea about the Magic 8 Ball.
So we have to have you back on again to talk about weird history.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Welcome back, everyone. That was a very interesting interview with Jeff. And now we have our Hometown Haunt segment. And if we have 2 stories from people that shared them with us this week. If you would like to share your own ghost story or creepy creature or UFO encounter, you can email us at cincycuriosities@gmail.com and I will read them on the show for you. That's cincycuriosities@gmail.com. So our first story comes from our friend Tabby Cat Gash, and she's a friend of the show, and she has her own podcast, and we will put the link in the show notes. She titled this one An Irish Doppelganger. Yay, more doppelganger stories. I love doppelganger stories. Jen's like, no, no more.
No.
Okay.
I'm listening.
So Kat writes, I was traveling through Ireland with my sister Donna in 1991, and we made arrangements to stay the night in a B&B that was a very old converted jail in Care called Carrington Castle. Carrigging Castle. I'm sorry, our Irish viewers. We arrived shortly after dark and parked outside a very old stone structure that indeed looked like a castle. After checking in and dragging our bags up the old winding staircase to our room, we settled in and made plans to go out for some dinner. Wanting to freshen up before we left, I realized I had left my overnight bag in the car and grabbed my keys to go fetch it. The parking area was brightly lit, but the walkway from the building was only lit by a small motion detector light, which came on as soon as I went out the door. Should have blinded her, my goodness. I got my bag and was about to shut the door when I saw my sister on the walkway headed towards the old stone archway that ends at the road. I called out to her, but she didn't answer. I closed the car door and made my way back up towards the walkway and watched as my sister walked out the archway and disappeared. Remembering that there was a steep drop-off towards the road, I feared that she had fallen down the hill and ran in that direction, calling her name. By the time I reached the archway, my sister wasn't there, and I began to panic and continued calling for her. Suddenly, I saw her behind me, walking towards the castle, and I couldn't figure out how she had gotten there. I ran and called out to her, but she didn't answer or turn around. Just as I got to the door, the motion detector light came on, and my sister wasn't there. When I put my security code in the door and went inside, I heard my sister's voice coming from down the hall. I walked into the sitting room to see my sister and our hostess talking in front of a roaring fireplace. I heard my sister asking our hostess for suggestions on where would be a nice place to eat for dinner. The hostess then excused herself as I asked my sister if she had been outside and was told that she had just then come downstairs. She had not been outside at all. At first, I thought I had been mistaken at seeing her, but I realized that whoever or whatever it was wearing the same clothing she was now wearing. How could that be?
No. Just no. Those things are evil.
We went to dinner, and I never mentioned to my sister of seeing her outside, as I knew she would be upset with the experience. Just like Jen. The next morning, as we were checking out, I asked our hostess if anyone had ghostly experiences there, and her response was resounding, "Why, of course, we have. Did you?" I only said yes, indeed, and thank you for her hospitality. As my sister and I packed up the car to leave, I looked up towards the walkway and wondered what or whose spirit had mimicked my sister's appearance and for what reason. I have experienced only 2 more doppelgangers since then. Jen, you're so pleased. Both were not only unnerving, but all 3 have yet to be fully explained. Will we ever know?
Wow.
Thank you,
This
Kat.
can happen to you more than once. That's no. I never want to experience that.
Well,
And if I do, I don't want to realize what it is in the moment.
do some people attract them more than others?
Well, Kat is a medium, so she tends to run into spooky things a little bit more frequently than the average person.
Which we might be able to dig into this a little bit next week as you introduce the next section.
Yes. So our next story is from Monica, and Monica is our guest next week. She is also a psychic, correct?
Medium. Yeah,
A
she's
medium, and she'll be doing readings for us just in time for Halloween. Ooh.
I know. I'm excited. I'm really excited.
I am excited as well. Monica's story. She writes, "My friend was getting married in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and he invited my office to join them. So my office mate, her husband, and my wife all flew down together to Puerto Vallarta. We had a great time. New Year's Eve came and found us cruising and the markets on the last day for that special souvenir. It was a bright sunny morning, as I remember. People were out and smiles were everywhere as we wandered into a jewelry shop to look around. I was looking at rings when someone called my name. I stood up and looked around. Just as the salesperson, my friend says that they hadn't called my name, so I ignored it. We went down the street further on the crowded sidewalk, and I heard someone yell my name. This time I stopped dead in my tracks and looked around. Did one of you guys call my name? No, was the answer I got. My wife said that Monica is a pretty common name in Mexico and sort of blew it off. So I did too. We then stopped at another shop. I was away from the other 3 and I was looking at earrings, this time in the front of the store, when I heard my name whispered to me, as if someone was behind me. I slowly turned around and there was no one there. I got tense and found my wife. I told her that I heard my name again. This time it was in a whisper. Cynthia didn't know what to say to me. But now I feel like I was being watched and I looked around for whomever was doing this to me. By the evening, we found ourselves at Elena's for dinner and fireworks on the rooftop. While we watched the fireworks, I prayed my mom and dad to help me figure out who wanted me, who's calling my name. We got back home the next night, and there were no more incidents after that. On Wednesdays, I would play billiards in a women's league. On those days, I would take my cue stick to work and take the bus home and pick up my car and drive to the billiard hall. But that night I found a note stuck to my car from Cynthia asking me to come home before I went down for pool. So I drove home and I was met at the door by Cynthia. She told me that my best friend, Susie, had committed suicide on New Year's Eve. The morning of New Year's Eve. I knew then who had been trying to contact me. It was her friend, Susie, saying goodbye.
Oh, and actually, she'll probably go into a little bit more detail next week because the story was really, like she had a dream later that she talked to her, and there was a lot to this story.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the Loveland Frog Man, in addition to being read by Monica.
the lighter
On a lighter note,
on a lighter note, we'll be talking about Frogman.
yes, the Loveland Frog Man
Well,
are
cryptids are always a good
scripted.
cryptids are always a good palate cleanser. I
They
mean,
are,
like,
and
it's
the
like-
Frogman is delightful. And we have an interview with Tim as well, who wrote the Frogman comic for our anthology.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yay, and hopefully by
Yay.
next week we'll be fully funded and going into our stretch goals.
Yes.
Let's
It will be a
let's,
little less
yeah.
tense.
yes. We'll be all relaxed and no longer worrying about this anymore. And
Are we gonna be like drinking margaritas? Be like, yeah.
I think we
think you
should.
should.
I think we should. Yes, I think that's
Or at least a
definitely
beer.
called for.
Yes.
Exactly.
Your drink of choice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So and also if you like the podcast, please subscribe.
Yeah. So for us to be more findable on YouTube, please look for us at Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, and we'll have, of course, the information at the bottom box. But we would love to have more subscribers and more listeners and more people chatting with us, because making a community is really important this time of year,
Definitely.
especially with COVID. We all like strange and spooky things. We can all just chat about it together. Also, you can find us on Instagram at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities and on Twitter at Cin Cabinet Curio. And we are all very active on social media. I think it'd be safe to say, correct?
I think so.
Yes. Yeah. So Jen has her photography, and Christina and I have our artwork. And yeah. And if you would like, go to Kickstarter, find us at the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities Kickstarter campaign. We are 92% of the way funded. We would like to be
Yes.
100% of the way funded, plus some would be very nice.
Yes.
We have some extras for stretch goals.
Yeah.
And you can just pledge to us. A digital copy of our comic is $5, but there are other tiers that are more. So
Yeah, and we've got so much great stuff too. We've got the stickers, we've got the we've got the prints on one tier, and one thing we haven't really talked about much is I was putting together a PDF of sketches and behind the scenes stuff that we're giving to people if they want to know more about, I mean, how people do the scripts and how the stories came together.
it's kind of like an art book for the project.
It is, because I was looking at all the like little sketches people did and everything, and it's really neat to see how it comes together. So,
Yeah.
That's part of the upper tiers. Pretty much all the sketch tiers are gone except for one, and that will probably be gone by next week.
Great.
But there is a lot of great stuff.
Yes.
And we're really excited. The book, we're excited about doing another one actually.
Yes. We're already talking about it. We got
Yes,
people.
there's things
Ooh.
burbling.
Yes. Burbling. That's a new word.
It's a good word.
Bubbling, burbling,
They're already burbling for volume 2.
and it isn't the sausages now.
And on that note, everyone, keep burbling and stay spooky. Good night.